Greetings, YouTubians, and welcome back to Wayne Sharp World, where today I have the pleasure of bringing to you guys the first ever button lock OEM'd by Reate. And this guy here is none other than the Mr. Designs Zero. Now, before I go any further into this review, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in today. If you like what you see, please do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, follow along, and I will continue to bring you the content. Now, we have a lot to go over on this guy, but I want to emphasize this is not a full-blown review because, in my opinion, the way I look at things, a review is a review of a product that you guys can buy. This is not available for purchase yet. This is actually just a prototype that is still in the works. As I said, this is the first ever button lock that Reate has OEM'd, so they have a lot to learn. They're really they're making a lot of improvements and changing a lot of things as they go. This is just the first prototype. There's already a second prototype in the works, but we're going to talk about this one today. We're going to learn a little about the designer, and it's actually kind of a team tandem going on here. It's a very, very cool thing we have, and looking forward to talk about this. But first, let's take a look at some overall specs on this knife right here. We have an overall length of 7.83 inches with a blade length coming in at 3.42 inches and a blade width of 873 thousandths. Blade thickness on this guy is 110 thousandths with a blade material of M390, a drop point style blade with a flat grind, almost full flat grind, and a handle length coming in at 4.41 inches with a handle thickness at 430 thousandths. Handle width on this guy is 985 thousandths, so just shy of that 1 inch mark. We have handle material of titanium with, of course, a button locking mechanism, which have a lot to talk about with this particular locking mechanism because it's a little more than just your average button lock. We have a user of a right hand tip up carry, a weight as of right now coming in at 4.3 ounces, but that's going to change, and a price that is going to vary, I believe, somewhere in the $260 to $280 range. There may be a Kickstarter going up for $250. The price is still a little in the works, but we're somewhere in that $250 to $260 to $280 range. So for a Reate manufactured button lock, I don't think that's asking too much. I think that's pretty reasonable in terms of the pricing structure that Reate usually offers to anyone wanting to manufacture a knife through them. Now, let's take a look at some size comparisons here, because this is a very, very nice size knife. Not small, not massive. I got some good size comparisons to throw up on the board here and compare it to. And let's start off with the Civivi tandem. We have the Civivi Altus, which so good. I would argue to make a statement that Reate should go off the performance of the Civivi Altus in terms of what they want to aim for with the action of their button lock. That's how good the action is on this Altus. This Altus is fantastic. And so is the Cogent. The Cogent's very good. I do think the Altus is just slightly better though. But nonetheless, as you can see in terms of size, basically the exact same length as the Cogent, and obviously a little bigger than the Altus because the Altus is just a smaller knife. And then let's take a look at some other a little more premium models here from some other manufacturers. Let's start off with this guy right here, the ProTech Malibu. Still just as good as it was from the very beginning. There's been a lot of other button locks come out, but this is still somewhat of a gold standard. I would say this and the Altus have been my two most impressive button locks. You can throw the Kaiser Begleiter XL into that conversation as well. But as you can see, very similar in overall length to the Malibu as well. And we're going to bring this Malibu back in a little while because there's some things to reference, as well as probably the Altus too, because there's going to be some changes made to this Zero prototype here that we'll be able to use those as a good comparison. And last, but certainly not least, some would argue whether or not this is a true button lock. I know because you're still utilizing that spider hook compression lock, but it's a button-activated lock kind of thing. So we're throwing it in there also because it's a very, very good comparison in terms of kind of feel and hand, kind of in overall size, kind of. It's so drastically different in aesthetics. One would think that this is not a good comparison, but what you have here is just the overall handle frame. I mean, take a look at that. Let's take a look a little more in depth at just the width and length of this handle. Very, very similar in not just width, but thickness. These guys are literally pretty much identical in thickness. The smock may be just a hair thicker, but a surprisingly good comparison with the Spyderco smock in terms of feel and hand. You obviously have a little more curvature here, and this is much more of a neutral grip. And to be honest, I'm going to say this right now, we will touch on the ergos in more detail, but I honestly prefer the ergos of, I shouldn't say I prefer it, but I enjoy the ergos on the Zero prototype just as much as the smock. They're both kind of neutral grips, but this is a little smoother in hand, doesn't have quite as much going on down here, so my hands just go wherever they want. Very, very interesting comparison between these two knives right here. But with all those comparisons, I think you guys have a very good idea of what type of size of knife we are working with right now. And now let's get into it, and let's talk about the designer and kind of a quick little backstory on this. So Mr. Designs, this is a gentleman by the name of Mihai. He's 21 years old, lives out in Oregon, and is trained in interior and construction design. He's been collecting knives for about 4 years. So right now he's working on designing knives. He actually has another design, and this design is actually not his, but his father's. So pretty cool here. So his father's been working on designing a knife, and Mihai kind of partnered up with him to help bring the idea to life. So yeah, very, very cool to see a father-son tandem coming together to bring not just any knife, but a button lock Reate manufactured knife to the market. I think that's very cool, very interesting. If you want to learn more about Mihai and his designs, not just his father's design of the Zero, but he has at least, I think, 2 other designs he's working on now. Give him a follow, Mr. Designs on Instagram. He's pretty easy to find. Just obviously, Mr. You guys see it in the thumbnail of the video here. Look him up like that. You'll find him. Give him a follow. He's got some pretty good content, and I think has some pretty interesting stuff in the work. A lot of them utilizing button locks. So very, very cool what he's got going on. Now let's focus on this knife right here, and let's start with the blade. Have a very clean, slicey drop point blade, edge coming in at 16 thousandths, so it is your typical laser beam Reate blade. Very nice grind on it with a super slicey edge. Might like to see a little bit more of a sharpening choil there. I personally would. Just a little more, not much. I know you're kind of cutting it thin because the goal here is to keep that blade just disappear in the handle when it closes. Kind of very similar to the smock in terms of, a very low profile blade when closed. And of course, can't help but look at that flipper tab. Very, very similar flipper tabs here. Now, I will say for this knife, the exact same thing I said for the smock. I would still like to see just a little jimping up here on this flipper tab. Not a lot, because it works really good as is. But again, I just a little. It doesn't even have to be, not even this same type of jimping, although I think this jimping would work very well. You just don't want to get it too close to the edge. You don't want something that's going to kind of bite you too hard. Just right up here, so when you come down, it grips your finger. Right now, I mean, I can kind of slide my finger off. Now, again, I'm purposely doing this. It's not this hard. When you go to deploy the blade deploys no problem. But again, it's just something that I always look for in a flipper tab. In my personal opinion, I think pretty much every flipper tab should have some type of jimping, whether it be very grippy or very minimal jimping, something there to help your finger make contact and deploy that blade. But even as is, it works very well, very similar to the smock in terms of deployment, and I know a lot of people like the smock, so definitely not going to be disappointing anyone in that area. The jimping on the spine here is pretty darn, what is going on? Focus. Going pretty good here. It's in that nice placement. It's kind of in between that Vox placement that you see on a lot of giant mouse knives, and then just your regular placement. It's very much in between, and I like that in terms of it fits my hand, and I think it's going to fit a lot of people's hand. So it's just a good spot. Even if you want to keep your thumb back here, you can still catch the back of that jimping, or if you want to really go up, you still have the jimping towards the bottom of your thumbprint. So it's a nice placement. It's a different. It is something you would notice when using this knife, but I think it's a very good spot for this jimping. And of course, you have a pretty nice tip that's not dainty, but still very slicey, thin enough to obviously pretty easily take care of any EDC task you have. And at the end of the day, guys, it's just another excellent Reate blade. It's everything you expect from a Reate. It's got the thin edge, got the premium steel, got the nice touches of quality and care and attention to detail all over it. It's just an excellent blade. While, albeit it is very simple, it's still done very, very well. Going into the handle and ergos, this is where things are going to get very different on the next prototype. There's going to be a lot of changes here, but we're going to go over it as it is, and then we'll also explain the changes that are going to be happening, and we'll also take a look at a picture to give you guys a better idea of what's coming on the second prototype. As I said, the ergos they're very, very neutral, but they're so good because what I find with this knife is it is a perfect combination of handle thickness and handle width. When you have a neutral handle, it really has to be just right in those two dimensions. It can't be too wide or too thick or too thin or too narrow because then it feels really weird in hand and it can be very hard to control or just very annoying and not as enjoyable to control as it would be if it had these really perfect measurements, in my opinion. Again, that'll vary from hand to hand, but I think a lot of people would enjoy the handle on this knife, even as simple as it is. You also have a very interesting integral backspacer back here. This is all titanium. So all titanium here, but just two main pieces here. You have the backspacer, which is part of the show side scale. As you can see there, all one piece. And then the clip side is another basically slab of titanium and two screw construction, but a very, very solid construction because of that integral backspacer. You basically have the piece of titanium laying on the handle here, and I have zero concerns over the stability of this knife. This is a very, very well thought out design, but also a very simple design. Really like what they got going on here with that. I think that's going to be a hit when it does finally come to production. Just a very, very solid handle. Now the wire clip. Kind of not the clip you would probably expect for a knife of this design. I mean, if you told me it was going to be all titanium with the integral backspacer and a button lock and just this, kind of very simple, clean design, I would expect, I would probably guess there would be a milled titanium clip here. There's not. There's this wire clip. And at the end of the day, you may or may not disagree if it works with this knife. You guys know I love my milled titanium clips, but I gotta say, the ergos on this clip, I've never had a wire clip feel this good in hand. Now I'm kind of back and forth on wire clips. I like the way they look. I don't always like the way they feel in hand. And sometimes I question how well they work. Now, keep in mind, this is a prototype that's been heavily used, so you have kind of that wiggle room there. This knife has been carried and used a lot by Mihai, and I'm assuming probably his father as well. So I didn't get this brand new. I got this from him, though. I am the only reviewer bringing you guys this knife, which I'm very grateful for, but this is definitely a used prototype, as you have to use a prototype to know what changes need to be made in the future. So kind of ignore any of the wear and tear marks you see. That's obviously just due from use and probably, got caught and bent a little, but nonetheless, even as it is right now in hand, it feels very, very, very good. No hot spots, very smooth. Even though it's not really touching on this side right here, the clip retention is actually pretty good. Of course, if this was a new out of the box, you wouldn't have that issue. But yeah, all in all, for a wire clip on a knife of this design and kind of this aesthetics that it brings to the table, it oddly works. I guess is the best way to put it. It definitely oddly works. This is geared to be a very friendly carry. It's supposed to be an office carry or a gentleman's carry or just your common EDC carry without that real aggressive tactical look. And they definitely nailed that here in the wire clip. I think the wire clip always helps bring a more casual look to a knife, kind of a less intimidating look to a knife, if you will. At least my opinion. Now, again, going into the changes, there's going to be a lot of changes on this knife. What we have here, we're just going to run down the list and kind of explain each one as we go here. We have a show pivot that you guys see right now. Well, on the next prototype, that show pivot is going to be gone. It's going to be just completely blank, not seen, and it'll be screwed in from this side. So I think that will really help clean up this look. And the button, we're going to talk more about this button when we get to the action, because right now the action is good, but making the improvement to this button is going to make a massive difference. This button is going to be recessed more. It's going to be done a lot more like a ProTech or the Civivi. As you can see, pretty much all button locks here, they have kind of that recessed area around the button, as you can see there, and you don't have that right now with the Proto. It's completely flat on the Prototype 0, and they will be changing that. So when you press in on the button, it's a lot easier to just bring that blade to a close. Kick it out, and bring it straight to a close. Same with the Malibu. And a lot of that is because of the recessed button lock on there. It makes it a lot easier to apply the pressure, not too much, and make sure it's enough pressure to get that blade to drop down and go in place. Right now, the way it works, it's touchy. You got to hold down just right, or it'll stop the blade or let it free fall and it'll do the clink and it won't exactly stay in place. Again though, this is Reate learning the way of the button lock, and when they figure it out, I mean, they're Reate. I can only assume they're going to be just as good as anybody, and they're really going to master it. So I'm really looking forward to the changes that they're going to be doing to this button lock with recessing the button, as well as the actual insides of the knife. Now, I'm not going to show you guys that because it's a very different approach to the internals of a button lock, and they're actually working on patenting that right now. So we're not going to be even talking or looking in the middle there, because I'm sworn to secrecy on that. I know what it looks like on the inside, but I'm the only one that can know for now. Obviously, when it gets patented, it's going to be brought to market and everyone's going to be able to see it. But I really do like the idea of it. It's the most secure form of a button lock that I've ever seen. And right now, their biggest issue is there is a little bit of lock stick with it. I guess not a little bit, kind of a lot. But at the end of the day, don't expect that on the production, and they're hoping to reduce it a whole lot on the second prototype. So really looking forward to that second prototype again. Going to be some huge improvements. That's going to be another one of the changes. There's going to be more chamfering along the outsides of the handle, and a lot of internal milling here on the inside of the handle. Actually, here, we'll do this. So as you can see right up here, see there's no milling there right now. There's going to be a lot of internal milling to help lighten this handle up, which even as I said right now, at 4.3 ounces, not exactly a brick. It doesn't feel super heavy, but it's just going to get lighter as they do more of that internal milling. And lastly, of course, the changes that they're making to the internals of the button lock, they're not even really specifying to me because they want to keep it very hush-hush. Completely respect and understand that. But when you have all those changes made, what you're going to have is a knife that looks kind of like this. As you can see, you have that recessed button there. You have the pivot gone. So a very clean, attractive looking overall profile, even whether the blade is open or closed. Very, very nice, clean, friendly carry. Guys, I'm a fan of this. When I first saw it, I thought it was maybe, if anything, a little too simple, a little too bland. But I've got to say it works. The little highlights of the, recessing the button and getting rid of that show pivot. And I really do love that simple drop point blade, that kind of a sleek profile to it and the way it disappears in the handle. Very, very nice. I think they have something very good going here with what they've started with, and it's only going to get better. Going into the action, as I said, you guys have seen me kick this blade out a lot. In terms of deploying the blade, it works very well, and the acoustics are to die for. Just listen. Nice tinky, clunky sounds with all that titanium and M390 hitting each other. Very, very, very nice sounding knife. So the deployment of the blade is fine. What needs to be improved and what's going to be improved is the button action. When you close the button, instead of it falling and bouncing, you want to get it to just fall in place. But the problem is when you apply any pressure to it right now, it just stops the blade wherever it is, whether it's here or here. I mean, you can shake it shut, but it takes a good little shake. So A lot of that has to do with the not recessing the button, and the additional changes they're going to make to the internal workings of this button lock, I think is going to go a very long way, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that second prototype. I'm assuming Mihai is going to send me the second prototype, which I cannot wait to share with you guys. I'm sure he's just excited to get it, probably a hell of a lot more excited to get it, because he's, him and his father are the mastermind behind this. But yeah, overall, as is, knowing that there's still a lot of work to be done, the action's decent. It is respectable, but you're going to come along hiccups and trials and errors when, regardless of what manufacturer you're working with, whether it be Reate or ProTech or Civivi or anyone, if they've never done something before, you got to learn sometime, and there's no better time than right now, and they're definitely doing that. And I think they're coming, making a lot of progress and coming quite along very well with it. Looking forward for the second prototype, and as is right now, very excited about the Mr. Designs Zero. There's no quite exact date of when it will be available for to start pre-orders on it, but pay attention to Wayne Sharp World, and even more importantly, pay attention to Mr. Designs, because they're the ones putting all the hard work into this. I'm simply bringing it to you guys. So give Mr. Designs a follow. Keep up to date on this, because it's going to be one that I think is going to sell pretty darn good and pretty darn fast in terms of selling out once it's available. So guys, let me know what you think of this. How excited are you to see Reate start producing button locks? You know it's going to be good. And they're off to a damn good start with the Mr. Design Zero. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and until the next one, I'm out.